Hello and welcome to Legalese. I'm Ernest Hyde, your host, and this program is brought to you by the Northern Middlesex Bar Association on a monthly basis. And today I have with me Nancy Catalini Chu. Nancy is, I will say, an expert. She probably won't, but in the area of elder law, and I've asked her to come on and talk about Medicaid and long-term care. So let's start off with what's Medicaid?
Medicaid is actually a federal program, although it's administered at a state level, as you know, Ernie, to help fund many programs, but the one we're sort of focusing on today is institutionalized, although I hate that word, but they use the word institutionalized elderly people placed in nursing homes. We're not talking about assisted living. We're talking about a nursing home, skilled care in a nursing facility. And Medicaid, when it is administered in Massachusetts, they call it Mass Health. Mass Health Standard is the portion of that program we use for nursing home placement. And that program helps subsidize it for people who meet both the financial and the medical qualifications for their program.
Okay. I want to distinguish a little bit for the viewers' interest in particular, and to see if we can minimize confusion. The difference between Medicare and Medicaid, which
Yes.
I hear confused on a regular basis,
Yes, as
even
do
by
I.
attorneys.
Right? Yep.
Explain the difference.
So Medicare is health insurance, health care. Kind of use the ends. It sometimes helps to keep it straight. But they're talking about health insurance. It's something everyone's entitled to if you reach the magic age of 65. You can apply for Medicare. It doesn't matter if you're a Rockefeller or you have $3 in the bank. You are eligible to be covered by Medicare. You don't have to take it at 65. You can defer it if you're still working or otherwise have health insurance. But when you do take it, it's paid for from your Social Security. It's a deduction through your Social Security. It used to be a flat amount for everybody. Now there's a sort of a sliding scale depending on your income level. But the Medicare is basically the health care program for those who aren't otherwise insured and meet the criteria. That, as opposed to Medicaid, Medicaid is a program that you have to be eligible for. So it's not just because I've reached the ripe old age of, and it's a benefit I can get regardless of my circumstance. Medicaid, again known as Mass Health in Massachusetts, is for people who are more or less indigent by circumstance or otherwise, who need aid in a facility, and again, trying to help with the terminology, maybe that ending to the word will help people. And if they need aid and assistance, then they possibly can qualify for Medicaid, but they would need to have met the financial parameters for that program.
Okay, and that's an important distinction because it's not an age-driven thing.
Correct.
As a matter of fact, people, young people in their teens and 20s, sometimes take advantage of Medicaid for
Correct.
health reasons.
For health insurance reasons, yes.
But today's program, we're going to focus a little bit more on the long-term care issues.
Correct.
And as you talk about the institutionalized individual.
Exactly.
So, okay, so how do you go about planning for Medicaid
Yeah.
and the issues that it presents when you do an estate plan and you have two spouses that are still living?
And that's an important distinction because people come to see me and they think the same rules apply regardless of whether you have a spouse or you don't, which is not true. The more draconian rules apply to the single person, which we'll get to in a little bit. But actually, when you have a spouse, there's what they call a spousal shelter. So there's certain things that are exempt or allowed for a spouse that aren't allowed when you're a single person. So for instance, if my husband were to go into a nursing home, the state would allow me to own the house. And that's a big one. And it also is allowed to be mine without any kind of lien or recoupment from the state in the future, which most people don't realize. They assume if they're allowed to stay in the house that there's some lien that's accruing against it. If there is a spouse living there, that is their house and they're allowed to do whatever they want with it. As soon as the person's qualified, they can buy it, sell it, and all of that money is theirs. So the house is a big exemption. In addition to that, there's what they call the Community Spouse Resource Allowance, which means that the spouse, in addition to the house, is allowed to have a certain amount of assets invested any way they so desire. That amount is just over $113,000 at the moment. If their assets exceed that amount, then they're what they call over assets. We've got our house, we've got our 113. Well, gosh, what if I have $200,000 in the bank? I'm over asset and I wouldn't otherwise qualify for the program. Well, Mass Health allows you to convert those excess assets into income. So they can tell you how many assets you can have, but they can't tell you how much income you can have. So if you take the excess pot of money, typically what we do is convert it to a specific type of annuity. So we don't want people going out and just buying any old kind of annuity. We have to buy a specific type, so do that only after you've been advised. But if you have that type of annuity, then you take that excess and that annuity kicks back an income stream to you. So you're going to get a certain amount of money every month to supplement your income. And it comes back to you and you put it back in the bank. So it's kind of a crazy game we play to do an end run around the qualification rules. So the way I try to explain it to clients is you started out with this many apples and this many oranges. And we might have had to turn some of those oranges into pineapples, but you got to keep everything in the fruit basket. So you have to do sometimes some manipulation if the couple has in excess of that $113,000 in liquid assets. But if you can manage to annuitize them, you can make the spousal unit qualified, and then the spouse who's institutionalized can have their benefits paid through Medicaid / Mass Health, and the spouse at home can use all of that additional income and all of those assets we've protected to support him or herself.
Mm-hmm. And how much can the institutionalized spouse have? The
institutionalized spouse can have up to $2,000 in a bank account. They're also allowed to have one vehicle that's exempt. And they're also
even though they're institutionalized,
and heaven knows they should not be driving. But
I'm loving this.
That's not my rule. And they are also allowed to have a set-aside account of $1,500 in a separate bank account to supplement their funeral needs when the time comes.
Okay.
So they can have a prepaid funeral, but if we're anticipating flowers and collation and miscellaneous expenses, there's an additional $1,500 you can set aside for that as well.
Okay. Now, in addition to what you said in terms of being over-financed, so to speak,
Yep.
And the amount that you would take out and somehow invest in an annuity, are there other ways, such as proving to Medicaid the expenses that you have that are legitimate, that are above and beyond what is normally expected of someone?
Yep, there's a certain amount of that we can do, and that actually what that allows you to do, it doesn't have to do with the assets, it has to do with the spouse's income. So let's play that out a little bit. So going back to my example of my husband goes into a nursing home. So I have my income.
He's not liking this very much,
no, he's
by
not.
the way, if
Fortunately,
he's watching
he's probably
this,
not watching this because he's at work right now.
Okay,
but,
good.
He's not anywhere near a nursing home, fortunately. But if he were to be placed, traditionally, your income follows you to help divert the cost of your care. So if we weren't married and he went into a nursing home, his income would follow him there, and then the state would pick up what the income doesn't cover.
Right.
That somewhat can happen with a couple, except that if I can document, I've got a mortgage, I've got heat and utilities and all of these sort of standard living expenses, and there's a schedule of them. If I can document that those expenses exceed my income, regardless of the 113 I have in the bank, then they will allow me to divert some of his income back to myself. So a traditional scenario still is that you might have the husband with the bulk of the income and the wife, who might be the one at home. We still find the example of her making maybe $300 a month. Well, we both know $300 a month is not going to support anybody,
Right.
even if you are a little old lady sitting at home most of the time. So if she can document her expenses, then the state will allow a portion, and sometimes it's all of the income, depending on how the figures play out and the interest rates at the time, the husband's income back to the wife. So that's it's still a fairly common scenario. So she can have the house, she can have the assets, she can have that additional income stream, and she can still have possibly some of the husband's income. So in reality, sometimes we have the example where the spouse keeps all of that and the state's picking up the full load because there's no requirement for the institutionalized person to contribute anything.
Okay. Does the community spouse also have an automobile? Is there an allowance for that,
Yep.
as opposed to using the one from the institutionalized
Yes, but
spouse?
if there's a loan against it or there's an equity value to it, sometimes we have to count some of that. So
Okay.
you have to be careful with more than one car.
Okay, good. So when you go about planning in an estate plan for Medicaid, what are the various scenarios that you run up against quite frequently that deal with the potential of long-term care? And let me start off by asking the question of how many people actually wind up in a nursing home. Do you know the figures today? With those baby boomers coming up and so on.
Well, what's interesting along those lines is there's this sort of statistic out there that 50% of people are going to need something at some point, and the number is usually thrown out, and the average stay in a nursing home is 2 years.
Right.
I always say to people that's really kind of the best math example in high school of an average you can get, because you're going to have people placed for a very short amount of time. You're going to have people placed for, unfortunately, a very long period of time.
Right.
So it's really a true average. Very few people hit the mark. They're going to be at one extreme or the other. But it's a fairly high percentage that will end up needing some form of care. Whether they actually apply to the state for benefits coverage is another question, but care at the home, care in assisted living, care in a nursing home, they say it's 1 in 2.
Okay, so when you do your estate plan, you're thinking about the potential for long-term care. Do you recommend long-term care insurance?
Long-term care insurance. Well, you know, it's interesting when we talk about the 1 in 2 scenario. When you talk to insurance people, they will say, well, you'll insure your car, you'll insure your house, you'll insure your life, and the statistic probability of using any of those products is much less than the statistical probability of needing a nursing home.
Well, I think life you will definitely
You will
use.
definitely, right. The timing might be the question, but eventually, if you still have the policy, that will pay out.
Right.
But unfortunately, what happens with the long-term care insurance is that's the problem with the product, is because so many people will use it, the companies have a very hard time pricing it, guaranteeing it, staying in the market to continue to take care of it. So we've seen a lot of the big companies get out of that line of insurance product because it's very hard to sell and it's very hard for them to price it correctly and market it. It has evolved over time. Nowadays you can get a combined policy. So it used to be husband had one policy, wife or spouse had the other. Now you can actually have a joint policy and both spouses can benefit from it. Either one can use it. There's no requirement you just insure one or the other. So I think that's an improvement. Most of the time, it's only going to be one spouse who's going to use.
Spread the risk, sure.
Yep, the policy. They also have created kind of hybrid products where you can get a life insurance component to it, so that if you never use it, which was a big concern for people buying it early on, what if I never need it? Well, if you never need it, it actually kicks back a benefit to your estate. So they've put in some bells and whistles to make them more palatable, but it's still a product that really is kind of targeted to kind of a wedge of people in the middle. So you've got people who wouldn't really take them very much to be qualified for Medicaid, so that would not be a good use of their money, or it's not an affordable product for them, because it's not a cheap product either. Then you have this kind of component of the population that doesn't need it because if something happened to them, they could self-fund for an amount of time. So their only interest might be if they have a family history of a Parkinson's or an Alzheimer's or a long-term degenerative disease. But if they're expecting to sort of play out in a normal fashion, they can what we call self-fund. So why would they spend a lot of money on a product? So it really has to target this kind of middle population who's already strained by trying to retire and recoup from the bad market that we have and they're about to get rid of life insurance and retire, and we're asking them to pick up another product. So it's still a very hard sell. The idea is great. The reality is a little bit harder when the rubber hits the road to find a good product that you feel that the money you're spending on it might prove worthwhile. So it's still a very difficult sell.
Do you find younger people sign up for long-term care insurance in your experience, or is it
No.
No.
I'm finding people waiting.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's right around retirement age that they look at it, and I would say maybe 50% of those people get past the even looking at it phase. And I still, maybe about a third of my clientele who's in that age range ends up buying something. And whether
Right.
they insure both people, one person, a mutual policy, exclusive policies. Some people aren't insurable by the time they look to buy it.
Right.
So it's, although, again, the concept is great, it's still not covering the percentage of the population that I think the government wishes would buy it.
Yeah, and especially in Massachusetts, where there is something in CMRs that preserves your assets if you actually have
Yes.
it at a certain level.
If you actually have it, at least 2 years of coverage at the minimum of $125 a day, $125 a day, then it will protect your house. So if something happened, you didn't have that spousal shelter, they can't take your house if you've maintained the insurance for that before placement. So there is a great benefit to it, but again, if the shoe fits otherwise, it's a great product. I wouldn't get it for that reason.
Right, right. Okay. When should people start thinking about long-term care? And I guess the question is, I tell people when they're very young to start thinking about estate planning
Yep,
in general,
correct.
which I see a component of it being long-term care,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah.
But what do you recommend to your clients in terms of, you really have to start now? What age am I at when you tell me that? Generally speaking.
Yeah,
It's a tough question, but
I usually start planting the seeds in the 50s.
Yeah.
Not that I'm necessarily thinking they should pull the trigger quite yet, necessarily. It depends on
not
a lot of
literally
factors.
pull the trigger.
Right. We hope they don't literally do that at any point. But whether they actually progress and implement anything, sometimes it takes a while for that to percolate. Sometimes they need to see somebody else go through a bad situation, and then they realize, oh, maybe there's some meat to this conversation.
Right.
But I start to say to them, these are the things I want you to think about. These are the things that when you see an article in Time or Newsweek or some periodical, the Boston Globe, pick it up and look at it, because you need to start educating yourself. And then prospectively, these might be the options that you're looking at. And when the time comes, we'll have a more detailed discussion about it. If they're a little bit older, we might actually get into some of that detail. And sometimes they come to me with that on their docket of things they want to really flesh out.
Talk about, yeah. And most people should be aware of the fact that lawyers are typically not involved with selling long-term care insurance. So, I
No.
mean, if we recommend it, we're only recommending it for your own good.
They
and
should definitely not. I should
not going to help us a whole lot.
I should definitely not be turning around saying, and here's my portfolio of all the products. No,
Right,
they should be
right.
referred out to someone for that. Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about look-back periods, because we always run into this situation of people coming into the office and saying they're now a single spouse because the other spouse has died.
Sure.
And I want to give my house to my kids.
Yep. And we say,
Take it away.
back up the horse, right? Yes, that's almost the universal statement. I want to protect my house. I want everything to go to my kids. And I have to say, well, remember, you're still here. So let's back that up a little bit and talk that through. But the house is usually the focus because,
Right.
particularly for our elderly, they still have the bulk of their assets invested there. That's where their money is. Some are fortunate and have other assets, but most of them, that's their nest egg, so to speak. So they come in, they talk about that, and the first thing I say to them is we're not giving anybody 100% of anything because there are a lot of tax implications to that. You are putting yourself in a very vulnerable position by doing that. And so although we want to make everything nice and good for Bobby Jr., we also want to make sure that you are not put in a bad spot. So we go through some of the options. What do we do with the house? And more or less the two major options would be, do you want to put together a life estate deed, or do you want to do some kind of irrevocable trust? There are pros and cons to each of those. The most significant to both of them is you are involving third parties in your life. Even if it's your kids, if you go down this road, they are now a permanent part of whatever's going to go on with this house. And I have to remind them at that juncture, when we talk about planning, it's really not planning for you, because if you spend every dime you have, the state will take care of you. You are doing planning because you want to save something for kids. So just kind of take a step back and think, is that really my objective? And is that really worth me spending time, giving up control in some aspect or another, spending money to have this done? So you've got to evaluate whether the advantages and disadvantages balance out correctly.
Right.
But if they do, the life estate deed is kind of like putting a beneficiary designation on your deed. So no, you're not giving it to them lock, stock, and barrel. You're saying, Bobby Jr., when I die someday, I promise you can have my house. I promise this in writing. Because you put it down in writing, you can't then have unfettered control in the future unless Bobby Jr. agrees to it. So you want to sell it someday, his name's on the deed, so he's going to have to agree to that. He will get a share of the proceeds, and then there's a taxable implication because it's not his primary residence. So we kind of have to flesh all that out. That's also usually only a good option under two circumstances. One, you don't have 12 children, because we're not going to add a whole bunch of people to the deed. That's a liability nightmare, right? And the other thing we want to be careful of with that, not only is it the liability and the exposure of adding people to the deed, but it's the fact that it's an irrevocable thing, and if you want to move someday, the protection you tried to put around it disappears. So if I add my child to my deed and I get through that magic 5-year look-back period, and 7 years from now I want to sell my house, you're going to get a big pile of cash, and that cash is unprotected.
Right.
So it's good for people with small families where everybody gets along, like June and the Cleavers.
Have you ever found one of those families?
They're very rare. They usually think they are, but I have to say, well, that might be true today, but can't guarantee that will always be true. And you're sort of at the mercy of somebody else being willing, acquiescent, and legally able to do something when the time comes. And you're committed to, this is the house, and somebody's going to hold on to this until the day I die.
Right.
And that's no longer quite as universally easy as it used to be to commit to. So sometimes that's what drives people to sort of the trust option, because they either have a larger family or they have a whole set of dynamics that they want to play out. Well, I want it to go to these three, but then I want it to go to grandchildren if something happens to that one, or I want it to go right to grandchildren. So they've got sort of a complex situation. Well, I'm not going to write all that.
They want to keep it in the family somehow.
Yes.
Perhaps.
But we're not going to put all that on a deed.
Right.
So sometimes the complexity of what they're trying to accomplish warrants a trust, and sometimes it's the lack of commitment to that property. Well, I really like my house, but what if I want a condo, or what if I want to sell? And a trust actually buys you the ability to do that, because you can liquidate within the confines of it and keep the protection around the proceeds.
Okay. And the look-back period now is 5 years.
5 years.
For everything.
For everything.
Right. So.
Yes, and I get the question all the time, but the IRS says I can give away $14,000 this year for gift tax purposes. Yes, you can, and the IRS will absolutely have no problem with that. But the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and Mass Health will not like it at all, and they will impose that 5-year penalty. And so that's something that I don't think a lot of people realize, and sometimes they've already done this gifting before they come in and seek advice.
Just before they go into the nursing home.
Right, because they didn't realize the implications of that, and then
they thought that was
have a big mess.
The right way to plan.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Okay. Caring for elderly parents aside from nursing homes. Any suggestions that you offer your clients? And I'm sure you must have a lot of them that are now dealing with elderly parents.
Yeah. One of the newer things that I'm seeing a lot of people take advantage of, because children are working, the system is extremely complex. You get answer A from this group, you get answer B from this group, so people don't know where to get good advice from, and unfortunately not even from the medical community can you get accurate advice all the
Right.
time. So I'm finding a lot of people taking advantage of geriatric care managers. So it's sort of your advocate who can say, no, these are the programs you're eligible for. This is what you should be looking at. This is where we can get some good home health care providers. They're vetting people. They're helping you tap into maybe a change in health insurance. So they're sort of able to navigate and advocate through all of those different programs for you. And they're also able to then present that to wherever we're trying to go. So if we're trying to get into assisted living, or we're trying to take advantage of a PACE program or a Summit daycare program, and the family says, I don't know how to do that, or how to fill out the paperwork, or how to convince them that my family member is eligible for that, you've got someone who's going to do that, who is not charging what an attorney is, and who's going to be doing it on a daily basis. You and I are not going to go into the nursing home and do that level of negotiation for them that easily, whereas a geriatric care manager, who's usually also a social worker or an RN of some type, will be able to do that for them.
Okay.
So I'm seeing a lot of them take advantage of that. And of course, assisted living is a big
Right.
newer
Yeah.
concept to the world that we didn't have 20
Pretty
years ago.
long wait, but
Yeah,
almost everywhere.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have, I guess the question is, do you have a way for people to easily come up with that sort of person? Because I don't think I haven't seen a lot of them available.
There's a new, sort of newer formed association of them out of Boston.
Oh, really? Okay.
And certainly, we have a handful. There's one in Harvard, there's one in Lowell, who I use a lot because geography, but there are spread out. You do find more of them perhaps in the Boston area, but there are some out here. There's one in Townsend. But again, they're not something that everybody's well versed in or well aware of.
Right,
and it's not
right.
like the people at the hospital are going to say, hey, let's hook you up with a geriatric care manager. But it's kind of a nice thing to be able to take advantage of if you are trying to figure out, what do I do with mom? I had a family come in yesterday whose mother is about 6 months away from placement, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to get the overnight care, or what if somebody calls out sick, and they've been trying to hodgepodge it themselves. That gets very difficult after a while. So if you can help tap into a reputable agency or multiple personnel through a geriatric care manager, then a lot of the burden is taken off the children to have to do that, particularly if they don't live locally.
A lot quicker.
Yeah.
Nancy, I want to thank you for coming on. By the way, I don't think I mentioned that Nancy's office is in Harvard, Mass. So if you have any questions for Nancy, she's always happy to take those, and she lectures throughout the area quite frequently. In Neshoba Hospital, for instance, she's been many
Correct.
times, and so on. So feel free to give her a call. I'm sure she'd be thrilled to talk to you. And I want to thank you all for watching, and hope you come back and see us again.